Hello everybody, I'm Professor Lucina Hackman. I'm a Professor of Forensic Anthropology working here at the University of Dundee. What I'm going to talk to you about today is about communication in forensic science. Are we communicating well? Do we communicate well? What are the issues and what are the research that we need to do in relation to that communication? So we know that effective communication is reliant on both how the message is communicated, but also on those who receive that communication. The ability of the communicator to convey the information to be communicated and the context of that message being communicated. Now that all seems very straightforward, but we in forensic science actually have a lot of issues in where we communicate and how we communicate and who we communicate to for a number of different reasons, and I'm going to talk about those today. When we work in science, when we work in any of our specialist areas and we talk to other specialists within our areas, that's really easy way of communicating. We can talk, we have the same language that we use when we're talking to each other. But when we're working within forensic science, we're working within the justice process, and we have to communicate at different stages with different people, with different players of different backgrounds, and for different reasons. So sometimes we're communicating with other scientists, but usually these are other scientists who aren't within our specialty. And we all know that even when we're talking with others who are not within our specialty, it can be difficult to communicate. We're also talking to other players such as the police, and they want to talk to us in relation to the investigative process. So what is it that we're doing? What is our role? What is it that we can bring to the table? And how can we assist in their investigation? But also we're then going to take all of that and we're going to take our forensic science and then we're going to take it into the courtroom. And we're going to be talking about the opinions and the conclusions that we can draw from our forensic science in a way that's constrained by the legal process and by the way that courts work. So we're talking to a lot of different people in a lot of different places for a lot of different reasons and having to convey quite a complex message sometimes. So we actually in forensic science, and those of us that are working in forensic science, and there are a number of us, forensic science is an umbrella term that covers a lot of different specialties, have a challenge when we're communicating. Now we know that forensic science is used and forensic evidence has become more and more commonly used in legal processes. And we have a number of different reports, and these are just a few of the reports that actually identify the fact that we have issues in relation to the communication of forensic science. Not just reports that are coming out of the States, but we also have reports that have come out of the UK as well, that actually specify that we have these problems in communication in forensic science, despite the fact that today and in today's world, we have a huge number of new ways of communicating. Whether we communicate online, whether we communicate through VR, whether we communicate through reports, whether we communicate verbally. We have this huge plethora of ways in which we can communicate, but despite this, we are still having issues in communication. And these issues are important because if we do not communicate our science correctly, whether it's at the beginning of an investigation, whether it's just about the fact of what we can do and how we can help and assist the investigative process, or if it's at the other end, and that's the end point of where we're working towards, which is the courtroom. It doesn't matter where we are. If we do not communicate accurately, we can cause some real issues. We can cause some issues right at the investigative stage or within the courtroom. And we have to remember that in the courtroom, it's somebody's liberty and it's the justice process that suffers if we don't get it right. So we have problems. And we have problems for a number of reasons when we're talking about communicating. We are communicating across boundaries every single time we communicate, whether it's with other scientists, because usually when we're working in an investigative process, we are the only scientists of our type. So I work as a forensic anthropologist. I'm going to be the only forensic anthropologist there. Then I'm going to be just talking with other scientists, but they're going to be DNA experts and biologists. They're going to be chemists, forensic chemists. They're going to have a whole different lexicon that they use and a whole different set of parameters that they're going to work within. So when I'm communicating with them, I'm communicating across boundaries straight away. I'm going to communicate with lawyers and the legal system and people from the legal system who have a completely different background to myself. I'm going to be talking to the police, and they again have a different set of ideas, the background they come from, and a whole set of language of their own. And my language is going to be new to them, and often my specialty actually is new to them as well. So straight away you've got this boundary crossing that we have to do when we're talking about forensic science, or talking about our forensic science. Every single time we communicate, every single time we go into a situation, often we have to tell and explain to people what it is that we do, what we bring to the table. So we're starting off from a point of which we're having to explain what our science can bring to any investigation and to any piece of work that we're doing within the justice process. And we have this difference in ideals, not just in the language that we use, but in the way that we work. So when we're working within science, we're working and we're trying to establish facts. We work with facts. Whereas if you're talking to the police, or we're talking to the legal teams, they're trying to create a narrative. We don't work with narratives to the same extent. We work with facts. This is what I can show. This is what my evidence demonstrates. The other thing that we're having creates a problem for us is the fact that we're having to work within uncertainties. Okay? So that can be a real problem to communicate and to get across to people. Every single time we're involved in an investigation, what we're trying to do is recreate the past from the evidence that is left by events that have occurred. We weren't there when those events occurred, but those events have left evidence behind. We collect that evidence, we evaluate that evidence, and from that, we try and predict what it was that occurred in the past. So we've got this situation where usually the evidence isn't perfect, or it is partial, and we're trying, or it could have got where it got through a number of different processes, and we're trying to evaluate how much that could have happened as a result of what we think or was suggested may have occurred in the past. So we have these different issues every single time we're communicating, not just the fact that we're communicating from a specialist point of view to a non-specialist point of view. And our end point is the court. So we're going to take all of that, we've got all of the way through, we've managed to communicate to our different players within the justice process, and then we get to court. And again, things change. So we're standing as the expert, and we are the expert because we have an expertise within the courtroom, and then we're trying to communicate our opinion and how the conclusions that we've drawn from the evidence that we've looked at and examined and evaluated, and we're trying to communicate that to a jury who are non-scientists. And that's completely right. Ironically, we're brought in because they are non-scientists. The members of the jury are non-scientists, the judges are non-scientists. We're coming in to fulfill or to fill that space and to bring that expertise to the courtroom that they do not have. That's why we're an expert witness. But then that creates problems in itself. We can only answer the questions we're asked. So we're dependent on the understanding of the legal players of the reports that we've written, and they usually and most often haven't had a chance to talk to us about it. So they've read what we've written. We've had to communicate in writing as far and as well as we can, and then they ask us questions, and we can only answer the questions we're asked. So we're constrained. It's not a conversation in the courtroom. We can only answer the questions that we're asked. So again, there's problems with the communication. Because normally, if you think of giving a lecture, you come up with an idea, you come up with a statement, students can ask questions, and you can unpick any issues they have in relation to understanding. That can't happen in the courtroom. And we have no opportunity to have that conversation and that dialogue. So we're constrained. Now, jury members actually can ask questions, but often they don't know to do so or don't feel that they're confident enough to do so. So it very rarely happens. So we have this problem in relation to communication. And we are often, when we're presenting to the jury, again, communicating quite complex ideas of uncertainty, of the fact that what we say is not necessarily the complete truth. It is a part, a brick in the wall, if you like, of what may or may not have occurred. So we know that we need to communicate in an understandable way to lay people. And that's fine, we know that. But whilst we're doing that, whether we're talking about lay people as non-scientists, whether we're doing that at the investigative stage, or whether we're doing it later in the courtroom, or at any point throughout the whole process, we are having to manage the expectations of our colleagues. So we have to introduce ourselves, we have to explain what it is that we do, we have to explain the limitations of what we do, especially in light of some of the things that you see on TV. You'd have thought that we actually could accomplish far more than we actually can. And we have to make sure that people understand, and there's an understanding of limitations and the expectations that are put on us. So we know we have to communicate to lay people. We have to ensure that our reports are easily and unambiguously understandable. And that means that we have to be able to communicate as well in writing as we can verbally. And most of us, and I suppose it's an advantage being on the academic side, we have that advantage. We have a lot of practice in communicating verbally. And hopefully our students understand what we're saying and they have a chance to unpick what we're saying. But we also have to be able to be as good in written reports and in writing as we are verbally. And that can be really difficult because there's no chance for a dialogue there. We have to communicate that uncertainty, but also make sure that there's no ambiguity within what we're writing. Again, as I was saying, communication to lay people is really important, but it's not just about us. It is about us. It's not just about us. It's also about those that are receiving the message. And we don't know what is causing a problem and causing an issue. So we don't, because we're not establishing a dialogue, we don't know what it is that's causing a problem with their misunderstanding or causing a problem that creates a misunderstanding. Do we know if they've received the message correctly? Do we know if they've understood what it is that we're trying to communicate? Do we know if they've understood the uncertainty that we're trying to communicate? Things like the CSI effect, it's just an example here. We don't know how much that's affected somebody. We don't know how much they watch those types of programs. And there's an expectation involved in the fact that we as scientists are standing up, and when we speak, it's about fact, and therefore it happened. And of course, it's not when we're talking about forensic science. So we don't know what's affecting the people listening to us. Are they hungry? Have they watched too many times watch CSI and have expectations of us? Is it the fact that they actually have no scientific knowledge at all, and very limited scientific knowledge, and we know from research that many people don't do a lot of science in school, so we are talking about things that are way out of their experience, and that's fine, because I couldn't plumb a house or put a electric system through a house either. So we all have our areas of specialty. But we have to speak from our area of specialty in a way that is understandable by non-specialists, and that's really important. And we have to make sure that we are explaining to the legal people who are questioning us, and so in a way that they understand what we're saying. Do they understand what they're saying? And are they interpreting it when they question us correctly? Because that can create a real communication problem. We can only answer the questions that are asked, and if they're not being asked in the correct way, or if the person asking the questions doesn't understand what it is that we've said initially, then we start to have problems that creates a complete and utter circular issue. So we have to try and overcome these problems. We know these problems exist. There's very little research in looking at these problems, and this is some of the work that we need to undertake. We need to make sure that what we're communicating is completely understandable. And we need to also work within the system to ensure that all of those of us that are working together are communicating effectively across the boundaries that we have to communicate across, for the right reasons and in the right way, and in ways that are understandable. So whilst we are communicating to the police, And to those undertaking an investigation, we are communicating in a way that's going to assist the investigative process. And that's different from standing up in court and answering questions on the evaluation of the science and the evidence that we've seen. Because we are actually at a point there where we're going to start to, where we're investigating, we're starting to consider, do we need to look for this? Do we need to look for other things? If we're looking at this, this is what this implies. When we're standing up in court, we're just answering the questions and we have come to a conclusion at the end point. We're still gathering data when we're at the investigative process. We need research to understand the pain points. Now, I've stood up and said about what it is that I consider the pain points, but we need to really understand those pain points. Where is it that we fall flat on our faces when it comes to communicating? And where is it that we can actually improve those? And how can we work? And it may be that there's quite quick fixes required. It may be that there's more research needed to understand why that is a pain point and how we can assist with overcoming it. One of the things that's a problem in relation to our communication of forensic science within the judicial process and the investigative process is that we have no feedback loop. So we stand up in court, we give evidence, we're excused, we can walk out, that's it, that's us done, and we have no feedback on how we did. Now, there's one that would be really nice to be able to hear and get feedback from the jury on whether they understood us. They can't do that, actually. That's not something they can do. But it would be great to have some sort of feedback loop when we're talking to the police, when we're actually working with the legal teams within the courts. How well did we do? Where was it that they thought we could have improved? We have no feedback. We're also looking at in relation to the development of lexicon, a common lexicon. So all of you listening to this are probably thinking, oh, how can you have a common lexicon of science across the sciences? Because forensic science isn't just one science. But we do need to start to consider how we can create a commonality in the lexicon and the words that we use and the phrases that we use and just the language we use. Should we have it across all of the sciences? Should we have commonalities in relation to certain parts of our reports but keep other parts specialist? I don't know the answer to that question, but I think this is an area that really needs research and work is starting to be done on that. And finally, we need to look at training our forensic scientists. So I will stand up here and say that I had no training in relation to how I communicate my science in court. I had people talk to me about how I behaved in court, you know, who I addressed, how I addressed the judge, but how to actually communicate my science in a way that's understandable, not just to certain people, but to all of these different groups in all of these different circumstances is really important. I have had training since I started, but at the beginning, most of the training was by actually doing the job and by actually taking on those communications. And with the lack of the feedback loop, it was very difficult to know if they were effective. So training and education is a really, really important part of this whole process. It is a really important factor in relation to our forensic science. It doesn't matter if we get the forensic science right. It doesn't matter how much science it's based on or the fact that we know our error rates, we know our uncertainty of measurements. If we can't communicate those correctly, then we fail at every level. Thank you very much.